me have David just tell a little bit about himself and what we were talking about.
Okay. Really pleased to see you all. It's very nice to meet you guys. I was born in Canada. Jeff's probably picked me because he's gone for age over beauty. I was born in 1963. My folks divorced in 1970, and I moved to the UK. I started playing the trumpet aged 11, 1974. Joined the British Army in 79. I spent 24 years with the British Army playing around the world. The requirement of the army was you needed to play trumpet up to 4 flats and up to 3 sharps, basically. Transposition wasn't anything we sort of did anything of. So once I finished in the army, I became a teacher. Just I wanted to give something back, brass teacher. And I've been doing that ever since, really. I cut a CD in 2010 and then started teacher training 2012 to 2015. 2016, I had noticed through the teacher training that my trumpet playing wasn't as good as I wanted it to do. So I got back into practice, and I thought I was going to try and do the systematic approach without any sort of guidance. I got to about lesson 13 and hadn't done much, and then got in touch with Jeff. He sold me his book, the ebook, and having read that, it answered a lot, but it still didn't really put it into a context that I would be useful for. So I've been having lessons with Jeff now for 5.5 years. And since that time, life on trumpet has become very much easier. It's been good fun. And you'll see in Jeff's screen, to the left of him, there's 2 books on his stand. These have come out in the last 2 years, based on stuff that he's given me to practice that I've sort of developed or corrected. So that's me, and that's how I'm here. Who's next?
Let's have Ali. I think he might be the one that's been the longest. And when we were talking about like language and stuff, I remember when you first started, it's like English was really pretty rough for you. And I probably was kind of crazy because I remember sometimes like talking louder, trying to.
Yeah, it was 2009 actually. Well, first of all, I like to again say hello and thank you very much, all of you, and especially you, Jeff, that invited me in this meeting. It is my pleasure to be part of this conversation. And also thank you, David, for your kind message and actually email that remind me to I have to reply to all. I thought maybe I have to, when I reply to that email, it is automatically go to send to all, but thank you very much to remind me about that. I should reply to you more properly, but I had a back, actually I had a tooth pain and I was really confused. I couldn't get back to. I hope in future I would see you in person, and because my brother actually live in London, maybe I would meet you in there. It is hope. This is kind of things that I hope see you in future.
Yeah, that'll be lovely.
Back to me. I actually about I talk about a little bit of my background. If I want to say something about that, as a matter of fact, I couldn't say something about my success, and because there's not a lot of opportunity here in my country in music. maybe there are two officially two orchestra. There are really limited activity in music, but there are two official orchestra, and I'm working IRIB. It's just 2 days of they sort of keep those orchestra after the revolution. I mean, because there are not a lot of activity in music in the country.
Maybe you can explain what the RIB is, because I don't think a lot of people know what that is.
It is some sort of broadcasting, not a company. It's a governmental TV of Iran. Actually, there are not. There is not. There are no commercially or whatever. So it's not free to have a TV in my country, as I said before to you, Jeff. So it is a government. It is for regime. Actually, it is kind of a tool for the regime to. And nobody could have a TV or radio, but people use the social media after Instagram and Facebook and things like that comes to use of everybody.
Now, when you first started with me, didn't you work at the radio station? Because I remember you took some lessons actually in.
That's right. Yeah, I was working there, but I resigned after I applied for the United States in the university and stuff like that. So I resigned for that, and I just working to the orchestra, and it is not kind of I'm working for them. They just gave me for that 2 days of the week working there, and and most of the time it is off because of many sort of things. And recent pandemic actually caused that to be off. For a long time. Let's go back together. Back to the point that I was trying to say about about my background. I was the kind of person that practiced a lot prior to start with Jeff. Like I spent like 3 or 5 hours a day in practice room, and I reached to the point that I couldn't gain anything special. Now I remember that I could hit the E flat on the top of high C, and the reason I remember that is because I was working on the Haydn Trumpet Concerto first movement, that I should have if you play with the B flat trumpet, you have to hit that E flat on the top of the that was that was my range, and for the in terms of endurance, maybe it is sometimes I could play 2 movements of Hummel or Hummel or Haydn concerto, and nothing more than that. And the things that I want to mention is that about my. Should I go? Should I go further, or do you want me
you can go further, whatever, and then when the other
Hopefully,
2 guys come after you, they can say whatever too.
All right. Actually, if I want to talk about my technique and things like that, I didn't have any standard up to the point that I got some of the, I received some of the Arturo Sandoval's book, and I realized that how his range is really good, and also his techniques on single tongue or double tongue is. I didn't have. I mentioned that because I didn't have any idea what kind of a standard I should have played, and after that, I practiced a lot, and it motivate me in a way to practice more. And but I gained nothing out of it. I'm some sort. And after that, I received the systematic approach. Actually, systematic approach. I received. My brother brought me a systematic approach because somebody told me that it is holy grail, and he bought me for that and told me that's the holy grail, and I practice it and I get nothing. But I get familiar with some other books, because he referred in the book, he referred to other book, as you know, definitely, and I had the same experience as David, I actually, Claude Gordon in his class mentioned something that other people bought his book and couldn't practice it. So I experienced that personally, and I couldn't reach that. But I Googled who can help me in this, and I found Jeff, and he started, and he asked me if whatever other books that I know, I knew Collins' book, and also I had Clark Technical Studies. So we started with these three books: Systematic Approach, Collins, and Clark Technical Studies. And then I asked my brother to buy the other books like Smith and Ions and stuff like that. But we started with just three books. If you remember, Jeff, I don't know. I don't know. I should mention something else about it, but I'll get back to that later. That's for me. If you need me to add something, please tell me.
Yeah, we're gonna come back. We're gonna come back around. Next, I was gonna have Mario explain stuff, and when you mentioned about your teeth, Ollie, I was gonna have Mario maybe share what happened to him, because he had like some pretty dramatic things done to his teeth like over the past couple of years. So you can probably share a little bit about that. That's a little bit different for all you guys.
I'm still going through it. Actually, it's on Tuesday. I'm gonna have the restoration process on this tooth right here. I don't know what number tooth that is, but it's it's been the last couple of years trumpet playing, doing this thing, kind of experiencing that, and it's interesting going through the Claude Gordon the videos that Jeff sent me of, and he starts talking about all of that, and equipment changes and teeth changes and all of that. And I've gone through this last, so anytime you go through a tooth changes or any kind of changes with your physicality or equipment, as Claude said, it's basically you're going through a change of embouchure, and that always has its, you always have to relearn exactly what you learned. And what I love about the Claude Gordon approach to things and the systematic approach, like when I think of the systematic approach, I don't only think of the book, The Systematic Approach. I think of the systematic approach to all the books. Like, how do you learn the books? How do you learn the step by step? What do the exercises mean? Why were they put in that order? And I found this important to me because I started playing trumpet when I was 17 years old. I came a little bit late to it, but I was a multi-instrumentalist before that. I played piano, I played bass, I played percussion, played a little guitar. I had a metal band when I was a kid. I played a lot of Latin music because my uncle is a DJ here in San Francisco, a salsa DJ. And then my other uncle is also, like, his nickname was El Pulpo, which means the octopus. So he could play congas and bell and clave and sing at the same time and do all of it at the same time and improvise. And so everybody was like, hey, this guy's the El Pulpo, the octopus. And so I came up in that kind of a background, and the trumpet was always very prevalent in that music. And I was like, man, I want to play like those guys, because like you hear those trumpet players like Roberto Rodriguez and all those guys from New York. What was the name of the guy, the Puerto Rican guy, Jeff, that you were talking about was doing, you went to go see him do a show, and he was doing the Clark's up an octave as his warm
Oh,
up.
like Victor Paz.
Yeah, he just died. Yeah, he had just
Yeah.
in peace. So
Yeah, I
like,
went to go hear Cats in New York, probably in the 80s.
yeah,
And I'd been studying with Claude maybe like a year at that time. And I of course got there early, and I heard the guy warming up on Clark too. And it was so clean and so effortless up to like a high F. And I was like,
yeah,
man, that's the way I hope I can play Clark.
do it every day. Eventually it'll come, right? So
Yeah.
it's and so I came to the trumpet after I played clarinet. You know, I was a reed player for that for a while. I was playing bass clarinet, clarinet, alto saxophone, tenor saxophone throughout high school. And then I came to the trumpet the summer of my sophomore year, going into junior year. And I just fell in love with it. One of my the trumpet players that was in the band with us was he was just amazing as a kid. I was like, this kid is, and he's even to this day. Like I look back on it. Sometimes you look back on things and go, okay, well, you know, they were good. They weren't that. This kid, he won the Carmine Caruso competition, and he got first place in classical and second place in jazz.
Wow.
As a high school kid, you know. Well, no, he did this in college, but as a high school kid, he was playing the jazz chair in the Grammy band, which is like the national band, and he eventually got his master's in trumpet at Juilliard. His name is Nate Botts, and he was a big influence on me. And I would just hear him, like I would go to his house and watch him practice, and like would see him pulling out the Arbins, and you know, and he was a big Charles Colin guy. And we both had a teacher named Mike Vax. And Mike Vax, now that I look back on it, I look on the lessons with all the experience I've had as a teacher and going through the systematic, you know, Claude Gordon, and I've studied with Claude, you know, now with Jeff. I've gone through an Adams teacher. I've gone through a Bobby Shu teacher. So I have all these different approaches, and I think it's interesting to see where all of that stuff actually agrees and actually works with each other. And you start to notice that there's certain principles that are the same no matter what, because you can't change the physicality of the instrument. So currently now I'm a professor of trumpet. I've taught at Cal State East Bay, which is in the Cal State system here. I've taught trumpet players there, people getting master's degrees, through people just being an undergraduate trumpet players. I teach at a community college. I teach jazz bands and combos. I'll probably get into teaching history here pretty soon. And I also have my own private music, my own private students, and I have a website. It's Mario Silva Trumpet Students, and my students have been all, you know, I have guys that got into Stanford on trumpet, and I have the last 2 years, I've had the first chair trumpet player at the state, at California State Classical, and they can play lead, they can play, you know, lead in jazz band, they can play, you know, classical trumpet. They're amazing. I'm like, it freaks me out. Like I remember seeing Claude talk about this, where he goes, well, what do you talk about when students get better than you, or like, you know, and they get that. It's like, well, that's like the best, you know, it's the best when you can hear these kids. Like I have some kids where I'm like, damn, I can't do that. Like like how do you, like, you know? And I think, and it's funny, it's like one of these things that we were talking about with the teeth thing. I think it's always easier to learn something the first time when you have to relearn something the second time or third time, because the subtle changes that you have with the tongue level and all of that stuff is something that, like, you're going to think it feels the same, or it's going to be the same way that was the first time, and you're going to have to fight against that habit. And it's not, and it's like I'm still working on trying to figure out exactly is there a way to make that easier, but it doesn't feel like there is. And I've never heard anybody say, you know, on any of the approaches on, you know, whether it's Adams, you know, Gordon or the Bobby Shu, like that's just always the thing. It's always like when you're learning, it's like a golf swing, you know, like if you were a golfer for years and you injured your arm or something, it's to relearn to be exactly the way it was. You learned it when you learned it that nice, easy way the first time. It's always going to take the same amount of time or longer.
Well, I mean, I can interject a little bit. I remember like when I started with Claude, my embouchure was kind of messed up, and it was really low, like about 1/4 on my top lip. And then when this tooth was broken off, it really messed my playing up, and I was so frustrated. I didn't know what to do, and I'd always thought that my issue was playing in this, not playing in the center. And then then the tooth was crowned. It was too big, too thick. And then when I went with Claude, it ended up being, we moved my embouchure up more onto the top lip, and that was super frustrating. So in the past couple years, I had this crown replaced, and I was really worried about that because I was like, oh no, I don't want to go through that again. I was really scared, and I put it off a really long time. And then once we changed it, it wasn't as big a deal as it was originally. I think it was because the mechanics were working more properly, and my embouchure was more on my top lip. So I mean, it was a little bit of a change, but I think like probably the changes, once things are working more correctly with you now, are going to happen faster than prior to that, you know?
Yeah, but it takes a, what I'm saying is it just
It
takes
still takes time, you know?
yeah, yeah. It takes time and it takes effort. Yeah, so basically I came to the whole Claude Gordon approach from just going through, like, I mean, I learned when I first picked up the trumpet, I went hard at 7, at 16, 17. I was like, I already had a musical background, so I knew what it was going to take and I wanted it. And so I went for it. And then the next year, so I went junior year, senior year, I took lead chair for like the district honor band because I was practicing 6 hours a day. And I knew that other high school kids were not going to be doing that. So I was like, I had a little bit of competitive mindset, which worked in the short term. I look back on it now and I would have been way more gradual and like taken my time with it and gone with the teacher. I mean, I had a teacher, but I didn't want to listen to him because I was like, that's not enough. I need to learn all this. I need to learn to play jazz. I need to learn to do this. I need to do blah, blah, blah. So I would just like steamroll through everything. And I was probably over practicing. And I remember I had one of the old versions of the Arbin's book, and it was annotated by Claude Gordon. And I would always read those. Annotations and be like, wow, this guy was really like hardcore about how he talked about certain things and his approach. And I was like, and it sounds like hardcore, but I kind of have kind of one of those personalities where it's like if I see something that looks like difficult or hardcore, I'm like, it's probably the right way, because there's no sugarcoating of how it is you actually have to learn something or do it. There's no like mysticism to it. It's like the mysticism is within the work. It's like the esoteric nature of it is within it, and I just kind of had that personality with it. So I didn't come to Claude Gordon until after I graduated college, after I realized I had limitations with the trumpet. And I was like, there's something I'm not understanding here. And I had been through different approaches and they had helped. Like I'd been like through an Adams teacher and been through like a Bobby Shu teacher, one of Bobby Shu's students. And I even took a few lessons with Bobby Shu, and those lessons helped a lot. It's not like they didn't help a lot, but I was like, I need something like more, because it was like I would take a lesson and the lesson was like it was very general lesson, and then it's like I might not see that teacher again for another month or another, and it was like, well, just do this, and then it was like, okay, well, cool, well, that helped to hear, right? But I was looking at the stacks of books I had, and I'm like, reading through the books, and I'm trying to find all the, I started going it, and then as I started to teach and take on students, I realized I had to take the responsibility of understanding these things more. I started coming up with my own approaches. I had an acronym that I made up called FLAT, F-L-A-T, and I realized that probably was not a very good acronym, because it's like, well, who wants to be flat? And it was fingers, lips, air, tongue, right? And so, and then I saw somewhere, on the internet, somewhere in a PDF somewhere, the 7 elements of trumpet playing from Claude Gordon. I was like, okay, here's somebody who's thinking the same way that I'm thinking, and his name kept popping up over and over and over again. So I started searching, with Claude Gordon teachers, blah, blah. And then I had one of my students who was an old student of Claude Gordon. He gave me his CG bench and was like, check this horn out. He's like, because I was playing a Strad, like a 37 Strad, and I was touring all over the world with it, but I was playing against large stages, you know, like really loud situations. And I realized like, I was like, why is it I'm playing this horn, you know, and it's a medium large bore horn. And it's like, well, I'm playing this horn over and over again. And I want to lay into it and I can't. I feel like it's holding me back. So then he gave me a CG bench and I started playing that thing. And I realized it opened up my playing. And I'm like, there's something going on with this whole Claude Gordon thing, you know, and like seeing his name over and over again. So I started researching a lot on the internet. And I remember seeing Jeff, and I remember actually seeing Aliyah, watching you do a video of you doing, I want to say it was Clark's 2 etude, and you did it 2 times in one breath or 4 times in one
Part 5.
Part 5, yes.
5. Was it 5?
It was outdoor, right?
Yeah.
It's Clark 5, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like,
that's one.
And I was like, damn it, I can't do that. Like, and I was like, what's the approach? I was like, what's the approach? It was like, if I could do that, there's so much more that I could do, you know? And I was playing pretty well, you know, like I was already like touring, I was, you know, playing lead, but it was like, I felt limited and I didn't understand everything about the equipment. I didn't understand why is like a CG bench a larger, but why would you want to play something larger, you know? And so like I wanted to know, so I hit Jeff, and Jeff knows because, you know, I hit you and I was like, look, I got a CG bench and I want to know what's going on with all this and blah blah blah. So here we are, you know. This is now that I think I started with Jeff in 2014 maybe,
something like that.
yeah. So
and
yeah.
then you did like, didn't you do like a master's? Like you started with me and then you stopped for a little bit and did your master's and you came back after that?
Yeah, I got a master's in jazz performance and trumpet, and you know, I've got, you know, I play on a lot of records. I play with a lot of different bands. I have my own records and doing a lot of different things on my own, besides being a teacher. And so it's just like, I don't know. I think it's like I kind of dedicated myself to like always wanting to give back, you know. And I think that you said that earlier, David, as well. And it's like, I wanted to know as much as I could possibly know. And I have found with like the way that the Claude Gordon thing, it's like he really knew, you know, like the history of the tradition. And I really want to carry that tradition and really give back to as many students as I can, because it changed the way I saw things, the way I understood things. And it's not like the other, I don't consider like even the other teachers wrong, you know. Like I see the commonalities and I go, these are the principles, you know, like this is, and like, you know, you can try other things if you want, or you can, you know, but let's go with like what we know that's physically true. And that's what I really enjoy about the systematic approach and Claude Gordon and the way that he talks about things. Even I love reading his annotations because I'm like, yeah, that's Claude. He has a distinct voice, right? Like I would have to say, you read when you know it. Yeah, exactly.
No, that's it.
And it's great because like, you know, when you hear Arturo Sandoval talk about it, it's the same thing. It's that same voice, you know. When you hear Winton talk about it, it's the same voice. It's stop.
It's
stop,
funny.
Stop with the CS. Work on it, you know, like.
Yeah, I was teaching someone on Friday and they came up about, well, why have I got to lift the fingers high and all the rest of it? And I said, no, what you're saying here is this is the answer. This is the answer. This is the answer. This. It builds so much confidence in your playing just by slamming those fingers down in the right place.
Yeah,
you know,
but
it's very like, Claude, you know, it's very Claude. This is the way you do it.
and the thing is, like, you know, whenever I come up with somebody that comes
that's
up
the way you do it.
Like, yeah, if you come up and whenever I come up with a student or somebody who's gonna like contest it, I'm like, just try it and try it out for 3 months. Give it 3 months. I think in my the way I see things, the way that I've seen things with students, it takes 3 months of anything to really get it to set in. It's like first you get kind of like, it's like the learning curve, right? You learn a little bit, you start to get better, and then you're going to go down a little bit because now you're going to fight yourself, and then you're going to get better again. And it takes 3 months, and it takes 3 months to kind of go through that. So, which is not always the amount of time that works out for when you're teaching at a college or, you know, somebody that has auditions and all that stuff. And it's like, you kind of, there you go. You've seen it. Yeah.
This is what progress looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like what you were saying about the 3 months. That's kind of a funny thing because like David, and we'll go to Paulo here in a second, but when he first started, I think it was basically like, hey, I just want to take like a couple lessons to kind of get this. And I said, you got to like kind of stick with it for 3 months to see where it goes. And I think after you hit about the 3 month point, you're like, wait a second, it's different than I thought like a month ago, you know. It starts to come together at about 3 months, you know.
Actually, for me,
it was that what I did on my summer vacation, really. But I did those 3 months, and it just thought, yeah, okay, this is the way forward.
Hopefully, I got the point that what are you talking about? That you maybe you're talking about that you realize your progress after 3 months. But you know, to me, it was like 2 weeks. As far as my memory helps, I realized the differences to practice the way that actually Jeff told me to practice systematic approach. It was like 1 or 2 weeks after a few suggestions that, for example, to practice callings faster. You know, I practiced prior to working with Jeff. I practiced with lower tempo that he suggested on callings. That made me really stiff. And also in systematic approach, he suggests that you have to hit the top notes really hard. Not, I mean, more clear and harder. And that, you know, that helped me to hit an octave and higher, maybe more than that. Prior than that, I couldn't hit the top notes more than maybe, as I said, E flat. Sorry, go ahead with Paulo or David if you want to add something about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, anyone else want to say anything? Let's have Paulo jump in and say, like, I remember when he'll explain when he first started, because I think well, you can just explain. I think his first inquiry to me was, hey, I want to take a lesson on Clark's technical studies, just on that. And I was like, well, there's a lot more. There's a lot more to it than just that book. And then he can kind of explain how that started and where it went. Tell us about yourself.
Sorry for my English in advance. And,
no worries.
I came from classical school. My former teachers was a student from Charles Schluter from Boston. So my background is about orchestral excerpts, playing Clark, playing Orban, and more focus on note grouping. I don't know if you are familiar with this kind of book. And then technical studies, specifically like characteristic studies, was not a part of my daily routine. My daily routine should take pieces, trying to understand what the pieces are talking to us. So the specific point of understanding how the instrument works, how can improve my range, position of the tone, something like that was not part of my undergraduate course. So since I entered my undergraduate studies,
I don't have the Paulo's voice properly. Do you have it?
Yeah. Hey, Paulo, something's going on with your audio. It's
the headphones.
Yeah, you might take the headphones off. Is there a way to do it without the headphones?
Yeah. This happens with my students all the time when I'm teaching them online. They want to wear headphones, and then it's like,
yeah. So yeah, because it goes like, we'll see if it's any better.
Is better?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was going like it was going like
Oh.
softer and louder and muffled and not. So I think this will be more consistent.
Better now?
Yes. So maybe like just say what you last said, and I think we were sort of getting it, but it was just hard to pick the audio up.
Yeah. So
You were talking about note groupings, the note groupings.
yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can explain the note groupings or if you other guys know about that. There's a guy named Marcel Tabito who is like a guy that made basically the American school of oboe playing, and he later taught a guy named John Delancey, who is principal oboe of the Philadelphia Orchestra, and he had this system of note groupings where Paul can probably explain it, where it's like he would assign numbers to notes within a phrase, and the idea was that the musical phrasing was going in a direction from one point to another, and that it didn't necessarily like end at the end of a measure or something like that, but you would assign that and think of the direction of the phrasing. It's a pretty cool thing. There's a French horn player that wrote a book about it, but like, it's not physically playing the trumpet, it's just more musical ideas and stuff.
It's more musical development than technical development.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
but Paulo
yeah.
can explain that.
Yeah, it's music development, and improve a lot when you have to understand how the phrases are going. And is a way that you can put like 4 notes. You have 4 16th notes. You always, in most of the time, you have to play the first note as a soft beat, and the last 1, 2, 3 going through the other one. So if I'm about to play a sequence of 16th notes, should be ti ta 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 ti ta 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 ti ta 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 ti, and not playing the first note as the strongest one. Ta ta ti ti ta ta ti ta ti ta 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 ti ta. It's the opposite idea. When you play this, like Clark, Lark, Orban, the sound should be like you are going through one beat to another beat, not marking the first part of the beat. You are moving its tempo. So it's very interesting book to read. So I came from this idea, but at the same time, I was learning how to play Clark with my teacher, so on. And I read the text. So the text, something there that I cannot understand. So I need to know what Clark are really telling me here. So at some point, I bought this book.
No.
In
That's
2002, I bought this book. So I read it, and I mark a lot, as you can see here.
That's right.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, I should mention that I've translated this book in Persian language, and it is on the process to publishing. Maybe it works for somebody who's here, but
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, I think that people should read that book in English language. It is hard to explain it in a different language. Anyway. Go ahead.
It's Claude's voice, and Claude's
exactly
Claude has an exact like a tone and a.
It is their lectures, actually. As a matter of fact, it is somebody said, as far as I know, somebody suggests him to write those lectures and those master class that he was presenting them.
Yeah. See, when I went to the first Claude Gordon brass camps in 1984, and that book I think was already submitted to Carl Fisher, and they kept saying, "Oh, it's going to come out. It's going to come out." And then I'd already started with Claude, and still another year or two, maybe a couple years, and he got so frustrated. And if you listen to some of the brass camp videos or audio that's on my site, he's actually kind of really irritated and angry at one point because they sent his writing to an editor, and the editor completely changed things because Claude's English wasn't really good. He means he wasn't college schooled and is proper in grammar and everything. So whoever it was edited it and I think they were a trumpet player, and they said, oh no, what it really should say is this. So he had to fight with Carl Fisher, and they wanted him to pay for the editor's work. And I think he actually had to take them to court to say, look, I'm not paying for you to mess my book up. But that delayed the book like a couple years, I think.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
he mentions it in passing on a couple of the brass camps, but I remember thinking, man, this book's coming out, I want to read it. He keeps talking about it, and I was like, why is it taking so long? But it's kind of like what Mario and you guys were saying. It's like, it's his voice and it's his own way, and maybe he didn't speak the most proper English, but you can kind of get what he's trying to make from the way the book's written.
Yeah. So
Back to Mar, or back to Paulo.
yeah. So I was reading the Clark text, and I bought the Brass Playing is No Harder Than the Breathing. I started reading, and I was doing some search on the internet, and I found a website with full of information, the website of Jeff Burtle. So one day I was in a restaurant, and I said, oh, I will send an email for Jeff. Whatever. I will send an email. If he answer me, probably not, but I will try, because
the early days of the internet.
yeah, I will try. At this time, I was not studying in the university anymore, just alone, and I sent an email. After, I think, one day, he answered me. So, oh, cool. The man exists, and he answered me.
The man exists. Love it.
Yeah. So we start talking, and my very first intention was, I need to understand what is the pedagogical point of Clark and Claude Gordon, because I read some similarities between both. So I want to understand, how can I apply this to my students? Because here in Brazil, we have a lot of good trumpet, but at some point, the secret is not taught. So I really want to learn what the meaning of each line of the text and how to apply that on the trumpet playing, whatever style you play, jazz or classical. I think the fundamentals are the same. So after our first contact by email, we start our first class. And since then, it's have 2 or 3 years, I think, I've been studying with Jeff. And my mind is kind of explode, because each line that I try to understand, I try to apply in the situation that is real, not just on the ideas. And what I found, that I know Bill Adams' Pedagogy. My area comes from here, note grouping, the book. Can you see here?
Yeah.
Just about. Yep.
Yeah, maybe hold it just a little bit there. It's starting to come in, slow it, like hold it steady, come into focus. It's
That blur back, that background blurring thing you have going is there. You
yeah,
go.
it's there now. It is. Yeah, no grouping.
Don't move.
Yeah.
Yeah. If
Yeah,
you just
so that's
yeah, you got
it's
it.
very focused. It's very focused on musical performance rather than any form of technical development.
Yeah, that was my 4-year undergraduate studies, was just that.
Like you told me that you'd gone to some pretty like a little bit more elite music things. Didn't you go to like Chosen Bale and do some things with Tommy Stevens, and you mentioned Schluter and some other people like that. So you came kind of from more like a orchestral university background.
Yeah, at the same time at Chosen Vale was Mark Gold, Stephen Burns, Gabriel Cassone. Yeah, at some point in one master classes, they talk about Clark too, of course, but they mentioned the same way I heard here in Brazil. So nothing new.
No,
Nothing.
I think I understand what's happened. When they accept college grads and start into the system, you can already, as far as they're concerned, you can already play. So you're like a rough diamond, if you like, that they can polish with the musical performance aspect, because as far as they're concerned, you play well enough. Now, we've all bumped into this, that actually, who is it for somebody else to tell us that we play well enough? There's more. And the only person that's actually offered us more has been the Claude Gordon method, where we're saying, yeah, okay, the sky's the limit. You can have as much of this as you want if you practice it. And the only word that's missing out of so many of the books is patience. They talk about the hard work, but the patience, that's a skill.
Yeah.
That's a gift.
Yeah.
You know, I was the 17-year-old Mario. I remember from 17 to about 25, I wanted it all, and I wanted it yesterday. I didn't want to wait. You know, I just get me the book. And I thought buying the books and getting this stuff, I had all this material, you know, nice thick stuff. But none of the answers are really in the book. You need a teacher. And I think that's the biggest hurdle, is that you come out of your graduate program and suddenly you're on your own. You don't have a teacher, and that guidance is absolutely crucial.
Yeah, and the
to
teacher
putting this together.
And the teacher has to be dedicated to it. You know, like
absolutely.
There's a lot of teachers who are, I don't want to say it's like about being a good or bad teacher, but it's like you have to be dedicated to the approach of, first off, you've had to have gone through the books yourself in the right way to understand how that works. And then the other part of it is learning how to talk to students with different abilities and different levels. And that's where I'm really kind of coming to things on my own, like as a teacher. I'm like, it's funny. It's like much easier to teach a beginner right from day one than it is to teach that really headstrong.
I actually mentioned that.
Because you can give it to them basic and just say, just do that. Just do this every day. Let this go. You want to practice your music? You want to practice your music? Okay, cool. Just do this first, you know? And the other thing, to be honest, we need to be honest about, and this is with all the instruments, is the trumpet is different than all of the other instruments when it comes to what you need to learn. I've played saxophone. I've played all the reeds. I've played, even trombone is different. I've played trombone. I've played piano, and nothing. The trumpet, you need another 45 minutes to an hour and 15 minutes every day to address certain things before you can even work on the other things that the other instruments are working on. You're not going to be able to get to your Lydian dominant scales or any of, you know, or your altered scales and all that stuff until you master things in order. And I remember hearing this from my first teacher, Mike Vax. I don't know if you guys know Mike Vax, this amazing trumpet player. And I look back on what he taught me and I'm like, I don't know if he was ever a Claude Gordon student, but he understood it. And that's the other thing, is like you come across, like now that I'm a professional and I've played with a lot of other great trumpet players, and I hear them talk and I go, you hear them all kind of say to certain things. You have to learn things in order. If you don't learn them in order, then you hinder other things in the progress. So like me wanting to be a jazz player really young and all of that stuff, I remember my teacher Mike was like, you really need to work on these fundamental things every day. And I was like, yeah, but I don't want to do that. I want to learn this.
Yeah, I remember reading an article about Miles Davis, and when he was in his young teens, when he was gigging with all the bands and started Woody Shaw and all these things, all those bands, they were very on at him about the basics.
Yeah.
Rather, you'll learn that stuff. I mean, he could do it, but
he was Juilliard level trumpet player. Like he was a Juilliard level. He went to Juilliard on classical music. He was a, you know, a great man. You hear those recordings of Miles playing. There's a he's playing on a French movie soundtrack. I can't remember the name of that album, but he's on fire on that album. Wynton sounds like a copy of Miles from that era now. You know, his technical playing was through the roof. Check this out. Check out that recording. It's, you listen to it. I remember it was on a playlist and I heard it and I go, is that Wynton? And then I Shazammed it. And then I was like, no, that's Miles. I was like, oh my God, he's like already eons past. And this is in the 60s or 50s or whatever, you know, and he's already like developed the language of jazz and everything way past, you know, what he was doing, what Wynton was doing in the 80s and 90s then, you know, and on the most avant-garde stuff. And I was like, I can't believe that's Miles. But then you like, the reality is like, I think when you go back in time and you listen to the trumpet players from who grew up in the 30s and 40s and 50s, they didn't have anything besides the actual root of pedagogy until if they found it, right? It's like they came across a Clark's book. They probably came across a teacher that studied with Clark, right? And as time went on and you had more trumpet manufacturers and more band programs exploding, all of a sudden all these other schools started coming out of the trumpet, and they became further and further from the root. And then now, you know, the idea is to get closer to the root. When I was in my master's program, I remember I decided to kind of dedicate a lot of my research, because they give you time to do a lot of research. And I pulled up the Duvernay. Have you guys ever heard the Duvernay book?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the book that was the original book that
That's the one that Arben learned from.
Saint Jacome took that class from that book, from Duvernay, and Arben were both in the class together. And if you look at that book, if you look at that book, I translated the whole thing from French to English and looked at like all of the different things, and then went further back. What's the name of the German book that's before even that one? I can't remember. There's a German book.
Altenburg.
I'm not sure. And then I had another trumpet teacher in college, Jay Rosetto. He was the principal chair at the San Francisco San Francisco Ballet. And he had an even older book that was for the tympanial trumpets. Is that the ones that would play for the kings? You know, the big long
Natural.
The natural trumpet. And he had the book, and it had all these diagrams of tongue level. And that was the focus of the books. It wasn't about like musicality or notes. It was tongue level and how to develop the tongue. So like the further you go back, the more and more and more it's tongue level, and it's, you know, they would say syllables, and the Duvernay was about syllables. And I have a friend who's a Parisian, and I had him read the book, certain things to me, and I go, what is this syllable? How do you le, you know, it's more like a le. So if you do that, you know, you'll notice the tongue is the tip is down, you know.
It's so much about dialect, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's like all of those things are like things that aren't necessarily talked about, and you can kind of teach through them. But if you have a student that's where English is not their first language, you know, say they speak Hindi or they speak French or Spanish, like, I mean, it's like, or like a Mexican dialect of Spanish. Like, cause I mean, like I see a lot of Mexican trumpet players who don't have any issues with articulation, you know, or like.
Actually, Claude Gordon actually mentioned that the best language for playing trumpet is Spanish. And also there is something else that he mentioned about tongue level, that there's only, if there is one secret in playing trumpet, that's a tongue, that they keep it like a chef that keeps some secrets for their cooking. For trumpet player or brass playing, there's a secret, as Claude trying to mention that, that's a secret of brass playing. That's a tongue. Yeah. If you remember that, several times I heard that his voice, that if there is a secret, that's a tongue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you ever remembered that? I don't know if you remember that. Go ahead,
he
Sam.
said he said about the tongue is the better language is Spanish and Portuguese
Yeah.
Probably.
because we
As far as
because
my
we
memory
have,
helps, I said Spanish. But anyway,
because
all right.
because we have a strong T. We have naturally a strong T.
Yeah.
And do you know this book here?
Oh. No.
No, I haven't seen
Valiant,
that. Huh.
Valent.
Professor of Paris Conservatory, professor of Maurice André.
Oh, really?
Oh
Cool.
yeah. Wow. Cool.
So this book tells us that the U sound in French is like E. So naturally, in the time of Orban, they not articulate two, two, two. They articulate T, T, T. Naturally, the tongue is up.
Is naturally up.
If you see the flexibility studies from Orban, there's a ka, E is already there. The change of the vowels. So this aspect of the tongue is the most important. And once I taught my students at the university, this conscious movement of the tongue, maybe sometimes they will understand that I can play better, easier, if I put the tongue in the first part of my comprehension to change the sound of the trumpet. I think the most important part is whatever I do with my body, my sound has to show me that I am the right way. So
Yeah.
before my body, there's conscious. If I know what I am doing and the sound say that to you, I'm the right way. So Claude Gordon, especially here, Jeff, brought to me this step, this way that I can understand, I can do this, that, this will improve this part, this will improve that. So as Mario said before, we have to learn, read, and listen the old timers. Because if you hear Miles Davis, there's a famous interview on YouTube. He says, what do you study every day? And Miles Davis said, oh man, I study Orban every day. So a guy like him playing the fundamentals, the Orbans every day. So we have to learn how to play each study from Orban, Clark, whatever, the right way, following the 7 steps. If we can show our students that point, he can independently learn after study with us. I think the students should understand how and what and for what to study. That should be our main purpose. And as teacher, each student has his own points that be strong, not strong. We should understand that and apply different materials to improve
I think
his
one
playing.
one of the hardest things is that the teaching that goes on in colleges is almost wasted on people who are 18 to 21 years old, because they're thrusters. They're not waiters. They want to go forward. They see that, and somehow, you know, Claude found this method or his way of teaching by doing all the wrong ones, by following everything that was a quick fix, all the snake oil. He did all of that, you know, and then came back to the idea, actually, sometimes you've got to wait. And you're very lucky, Mario, if you can start somebody new and keep them enthused. I think that's the hard part of keeping these guys enthused by saying, just do this, just do that, it'll come.
I have found it's like with students, and you're dealing with the different personalities. There's some students I have to trick into practicing. You trick them. You go, you go like, well, do this first, this, and then try that. You know, like, oh, you want to do that? Okay, cool. Do this, then try that. And then they feel the body kick in. It's weird because like as when you start to feel the tongue level stuff kind of kick in, all of a sudden the trumpet feels different, right? Like it feels light,
very.
it feels dark, it feels bright all at the same time. Everything resonates, and you can hear it. You know, as a teacher, when you can hear when a player has everything working right. You can hear when they're working against themselves. You know, you can hear when they're fighting against the horn, when things aren't lining up right. And there's like, I've been kind of working on ways to kind of trick them using what they think they know and how to like meld it into something and then go, okay, cool. All right. And then like you give it a couple weeks of seeing them and then you go, okay, now let's just take that out completely. Let's focus on this. Now we're going to separate this. Now, like, you know, and this is where like, if you look in the tech world of like, they have, Salesforce has a whole thing called Trailblazers now, right? Where you can go and you can like, you create an account and you're like in this video game world where you can learn all the different software that Salesforce has and all the different, you know, skills that they have. And you can kind of go through things methodically. But I guarantee you can only get to a certain point where it's like, you're going to actually have to like, you know, like it's fun and, but they've broken down everything into baby steps, you know, and that's kind of like what we have to do. As teachers, you got to break everything down into baby steps because there's so much to tackle, you know, there's and you know, I've been like trying to wrap my head around exactly how to write a book. I wanted to write a book that's like flexibilities from beginner all the way to advanced, including all the theory and harmony that's behind it. Because if you look at Clark's, or if you look at Colin, you know, Colin number 5, those are just dominant arpeggios. You know, you're playing them with alternate fingerings because you're playing the harmonic series, but they're dominant arpeggios. And then you get to 9 and you're playing up to the 9. So there's a way to kind of like, well, that's this chord, that's this chord, that's this chord. And if you take the same flexibilities from the other books, you can also do that. But how do you go from baby steps, from not even being able to play the G above low C to playing a G above high C? You know, which is always
it's a valuable point you make there, but it's true that actually lip flexibility is probably an intermediate skill in itself anyway. The youngsters, they don't get it as much. The best you can probably hope for is exercises like this, which we should all avoid. I know this is like spitting on the flag, but just bear with me. But I teach junior school children, so they are lucky if they get a range within a year. Really, I mean, it's a whole class program. We give them an instrument, and they come in. They get 45 minutes with me a week for 3 terms, or I think you call them semesters, yeah. But that is as close to lip flexibility as some of them will get, because the harmonics are too far apart. Until you can't really start until you've got some range behind you.
So that example right there of so buzzing the mouthpiece, is because we were going to talk about, but this is going to be one of the aspects we talk about. Buzzing the mouthpiece. If somebody, you know, comes to me with that, or they need that, the first thing that it tells me is maybe things haven't lined up for them. Maybe they're going through some kind of tooth thing or whatever, or they're going through an embouchure change. And I don't want to even touch that stuff, because you start going down that path, you're going to lose 2 or 3 years of progress right there, because that's hard to get out of, right? And it's already hard to get out of even if you know what you're doing. So let's not like, and then when a student is already thinking about stuff like that, it's already like, okay, we've got like lots of different things to work
no,
with.
But
I will use the mouthpiece and a mouthpiece exercise, a buzzing exercise, to trick them to do things correctly. You know, it's like you go, because it's not the same, right? Buzzing in the mouth is not the same as playing the trumpet.
No, it isn't. It can't be.
Yeah, but you can make it, trick them into going into things going like, you know, working the way mechanically they need to, but then it leads them into playing the trumpet and then doing it within the trumpet. Because I think what my thoughts it is on playing the mouthpiece. When you play the mouthpiece, you're working on different layers than you are that are in the horn. When you're working in the horn, you're kind of working more of the soft tissue in the back that you can't really get to with the mouthpiece.
No, absolutely.
Yeah.
As I say, that it was I only directed that question because you were talking about flexibility and how to get it in the very young, and they need range before you can really deal with flexibility.
Yeah.
Well, what I'll do when does my speaker come on? Yeah. What I'll do when I'm working with a young student, like I've got a couple younger ones, fifth grader and a sixth grader that I just started several months ago, is if they can't initially get up that high, I'll write it in a lower key and say, hey, just finger it with first valve and just do it here, and then do first and second. And then I gradually add more fingerings on it, and then I'll change. So I'll have to improvise, making a different sort of flexibility study. I'll hand write them out. Like I might take something like Smith number 2, and instead of having them go up to like a G on top of the staff, I'll just have them go back and forth between a C and a G, and then a C up to a C in the middle of the staff, and then do some different fingerings and build onto it till they can finally. It's like I'm always looking for intermediary steps.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was.
I don't know.
I'm just thinking maybe Mario could develop my trumpet harmonics then, because that is progressive, isn't it?
I actually have the beginnings of all that written down. I've already printed it. It's kind of like the book that I want to start working on, which is Flexibilities for Beginners all the way, and it's exactly what Jeff is saying, but I have them doing all the tonguing stuff through it, all the tonguing models, because the tonguing models, if you don't do any K tonguing, you don't get that subtle tongue movement that you need that shifts certain notes within certain parts of the partials. And if you do them and you get it and you can convince a kid to just K tongue a bunch, you'll be surprised all of a sudden everything starts popping out.
Yeah, and you just mentioned something, Mario, that David in his book Trumpet Harmonics, when he talked with some different people about I don't know if you want to mention the name or not, but a couple of people that initially said they didn't use flexibility studies, and then once they did some of the stuff out of your book, David, with single tonguing and K tonguing, that all of a sudden they saw the value of the slur, doing it slurred. And it's kind of like, I think sometimes people don't see the value of models. I know we can do a whole bunch of models, but even just doing like slurring and tonguing or adding K tongue in there can also enhance the ability of people to feel the tongue level and kind of pinpoint it better. And
I'm using the word trick, and I think you're using the word enhance, and we're using them
right.
same.
Yeah, we're saying the same thing.
Yeah, it's like you get somebody to like, and all of a sudden they feel the harmonics flip out, and they're not sure why, and then it's like, okay, cool, you felt that flipping sensation. All right, now let's take maybe some irons, depending on what the level of the student is, or and it's like irons, I feel like is a more good beginner book, but it still starts too high right away, right? It's like that G to B right there in group 1 is a little bit tricky for a beginner, but I've already like written flexibilities that start from the bottom of the horn. Why it's like, why is there no flexibility books that are just like low F sharp to C sharp just repeatedly? Like that should be there. And it's I think that's kind of our job, like as the pedagogy nerds to put together.
I think one point very, very important in learning. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You sound great.
I think one point that we should understand is 3 when teaching a student is sound, vision, and muscles. We can understand this point applying Claude Gordon or Clark studies. Claude Gordon mentioned play by feel, right? By feel means one point of learning. The other one is sound. So when he plays, he feels and the sound come out, right? So
I think very Paolo, I think he's very focused on the idea that when you're practicing technique, when you're practicing technique and developing technique, it has to be through feel. When it comes
Yeah.
to the music and bits and pieces, that's when your ears kick in, because you think, well, you're more concerned about tuning, but the actual technique, you know, doing
Yeah.
K-tone exercises really tones the muscles inside your mouth, not the ones outside.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that gets missed though, like if you're talking about like the, you know, like the Bill Adams and Arnold Jacobs and that school of thought about thing where they're primarily focused on sound, is that good sound is actually the byproduct of correct technique. So it's like sound and technique are connected to each other. So you can't just say focus on sound and the technique will fix itself. But if your technique is right, you will have
Yeah.
better sound. So it's
Yeah.
like they both are important, but it's like which one causes the other one to happen.
Yeah.
And of
And-
course, like what you're saying is you got to listen to yourself, because we're not just playing the trumpet like it's typing on the computer or something like that. We're interacting with it the whole time on every single note, you know?
Yeah, if you apply the Carmine Caruso philosophy, is the opposite. He mentions that don't worry about the sound, play and feel the muscles, and the sound will come whatever. So it's the opposite idea. I think what I do with my students is I do the elements, I do the way that can work, but who will decide? The student, not me. I will not impose to my students what they should practice. I gave them the right tools. I think for me, the right tool is Claude Gordon, is Clark, is Orban. Buzzing is one aspect that we must understand that for someone is better, for the other person is not better. But as Thomas Stevens said, the critics of buzzing are on the top of the musical world. He said that on the Chosen Vale. So buzzing is important. I don't know, but it's recommended. You must practice. If you apply well for your practice, why not a little bit of practice every day? But the student should understand what is improving his playing and not limiting his playing. So since I started to understand and apply the concepts of Claude Gordon and Clark, things are going very, very fast than before.
I just feel I have tried. I bought James Thompson's buzzing book when it first came out. I wrecked myself on that thing for about a year. I thinking like Claude Gordon for a second, I just got to the stage, well, if you've got time to stick a mouthpiece on your face, why don't you stick the trumpet on the mouthpiece and play the whole damn thing? And if you've got time to mouthpiece, you've got time to do something else. I think, you know, for everybody who will advocate mouthpiece practice, you'll find someone that will advocate pedals, and they don't necessarily. They're in opposite. They think in opposite ways rather than doing all of it.
Yeah, I have one interesting story to tell you about this. I have one student, trumpet player, and he came from a teacher who applied 9% of his teaching buzzing. So she came, and I said to her, the first class, let's keep the mouthpiece out of practice and start on the trumpet. And she said, no, I need to buzzing. I need to buzzing. So, okay, practice my instruction here. Do your buzzing. Okay, at some point, I told her, your performance is good, but not as good as you could play, because I think buzzing is not good for you right now at this stage. So can you go with me on this new adventure? Let's keep the mouthpiece out of practice for 3 months. She said, okay, let's practice this daily routine. Clark. After 6 months, she admitted to me, if I listened to you before, I could play much, much better and faster. Now I discovered that buzzing at this moment for me is not improving my playing. At some point at my start, maybe it's okay, but right now it's not help me. So I try to explain this to her, and finally she understands. 6 months after we have our conversation. As I said before, I do not, how can I say it, oblige her to not use buzzing. I show her during 6 months, 3 months, that buzzing was not good at that point for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And
kind of
today,
like
Claude
it's
used
kind of
it for
like
the
what
beginners,
Mario
probably.
was. It's kind of like what Mario was saying with figuring out how to trick the student. Like you guys, I don't know how much of it you guys have listened to those 12 sessions of Claude Gordon's pedagogy class, but in there he mentions that, like, if a student's doing an exercise and you know that the exercise hasn't done the work on the student. I think that's one thing that a lot of people miss, is the value of playing an exercise over and over, day after day and weeks, until it transforms your playing. Because a lot of times, like, with even myself or students or whatever, we think that, like, I can play this exercise. It's like, you might be able to play it right now, but if you stay on it for a while, it's going to change your playing.
Yeah.
And that's where we're getting at with, like, patience and stuff. So you might have to say, hey, let's just add another model. Let's do a variation on this. And you're really keeping them on the same exercise, and they think that you're doing something different, but you've allowed that exercise to, like, settle in and change their playing.
I've taken,
I think,
I'll take students through periods where I only work on, like, I'll take out, so we go through the A, B, C, D, E, the same way that Claude did. Well, I take out B, C, D, E, because I just go, you just need to do flexibilities every day and just get the feel of that, because they go to school, right? And then they have jazz band, they have jazz band 2, they have marching band, they have all of this stuff. And I'm like, there is no way that you're going to be able to pick up the feel of A, B, C, D, and E, but we can get a lot of mileage out of just A. And then once the summer hits or winter hits, we can start adding that other stuff in. But nothing is going to be effective if it's only sparsely done, or if it's done on completely burnt out chops. This is the other thing, is like, that's one thing I fight against it with my student base, because they're like, I don't know, I'm teaching from beginners all the way to, college level trumpet players, master's level, and some professionals even. And it's like tricking them by saying, hey, only do this. So now we've established a baseline of 20-30 minutes of them doing the same thing every day. So how do we take that? Now I can hear 3 months into of them playing, I go, okay, I've tricked them into just doing what I've asked them to do for 20-30 minutes every day, and they're starting to feel it. Okay, now we can take that, chunk that out, divide that, and put that in part B, and start adding in the part B, then start adding in part C, and then this is over the course of 2-3 years. Because it's like, how are you going to get somebody to, like, honestly, to be a professional trumpet player, to do the things that it takes to be like a high level trumpet player? You're going to have to be practicing 2 to 3 hours a day. Like, it really is. There's really no way around that, right? You need your 45 minutes of just establishing everything and, like, really feeling comfortable with it. You need to be doing breathing exercises. We haven't.
Yeah.
The best that I've ever played, and I'm not there yet, because I'll be honest, I haven't been able to do my breathing exercises. It's just been too much of, like,
COVID has spoiled a lot of things, hasn't it?
Yeah. And then, like, but the best that I have ever played, man, I was doing my breathing exercises repeatedly all the time, every day. And it was when I was in my master's, because I would walk outside the music building, and there was, like, a fairway and nice cut grass, and I would just walk around that thing and just, then just walk around it and do my breathing exercises. It doesn't take very long when you have like a place to do it and it's very set to go. You can do it and you can get it done. And it becomes very meditative. And something about that, when you're doing those breathing exercises and you're on stage and you're in a high pressure situation and you got to play some lead. And I've had some pretty high pressure situations. I've had to come in and sight read the Tower of Power book before with Lenny Williams. And I remember that was like, you know, probably my prime when I was playing. I remember just sitting on stage and being like, all I got to do is take a big breath, fill up my chest full of air, just relax and just say the right syllable and I will nail that high F sharp. And it doesn't matter if I have a good sound system or anything. I know I can play it nice and quiet and the sound is clear and that will cut through because I have a CG bench and that bench like puts that little cherry exactly where you want and I can push that thing forward to the back of I was playing in like outdoor arena and I was like, I know I can make that guy out there hear this by just going twee, and it's like a twee, right? Like everything resonates right. And like and then if you've been working on your tongue, you know you can go twee if you need to, you know. And it was just a very relaxed feeling, but I know that I don't have that same relaxed feeling right now because I haven't been doing my breathing exercises the way I should be. But I was playing a gig last night and I was like, oh God, I got to the second set and I'm playing like it was like a wedding gig and it's all those, you know, all those covers, you know, like the September and, you know, all the Earth, Wind and Fire stuff. And it's just hard lead playing and it's hard on the chops and it's against the sound system and against a drummer right behind you who's just bashing away. And I remember I got to the second set and I'm like, oh, I haven't been doing my breathing exercises. This is going to be a little harder because now I've already been doing this for an hour and 15 minutes and I'm starting to get tired physically. Like I know it's here. I have all of this here, but if you don't have it here and you're not used to just relax, boom, it's going to be like, it's going to be more conscious than unconscious. And that's the whole thing about like tricking your students to doing only certain basic things. Then you can add the next element. Then you can add the next element. You can't just take them and go, hey, do all this. Because you will burn them out. And I've learned that from experience by burning out like some students, you know, where I'm like, oh, I probably gave them too much, you know? So it's like, how do you trick them into like slowly like.
No, it's developing trust as well, isn't it?
Yeah. I'll tell parents that all the time, you know, especially a very beginning student, you know, 4th or 5th grader. They're like, oh, they're not practicing. They're not practicing every day. And I'm like, are they practicing 3 or 4 times a week? Yeah, but only for 20 minutes. I'm like, that's fine because they're a 4th or 5th grader. If I can get a middle school kid to be practicing 20, 30 minutes a day every day is way more than them practicing 3 hours one day. Right, because it's the consistency thing. It's the muscle memory. It's the how do you relax in the situation, you know? So that's the part of it that really helped me with the physical approach because I don't want to be thinking about the music on the page at that point. I see that when I'm looking at music on the page, I think of an interval and I think of like, and I don't, and it's not even that I think of an interval. I think of it's like my body feels what it is, and then it just mimics what it knows. You know, it's like, and then if it's not in your muscle memory from you doing it in your routines every day, you're gonna, I think it sounds like this, and you're gonna go for broke, you know, and then, you know, what happens there?
One of the things that I think is kind of going without being said that is kind of unique to all of us and is, I mean, we like to practice. I mean, I've listened to some different things where people describe what they do on the trumpet and even from some really good players where they look at practicing as just like something like it's a chore that they dread having to do, you know. And but I think with all of us, we enjoy doing it. It's like it's fun to pull my trumpet up and see what I can accomplish each day. And I think that also helps with students too, where it's like it's exciting. I mean, it's like you get better and it gets easier and you have more fun. And if you can like transfer that to a student in the ways we're talking about, where you give them a little bit, they start seeing the reward of doing it. And then all of a sudden they want to do it more. And it becomes like really, they can see the benefit of it all, you know?
Yeah. I think this is what happened with Chris Gecker. So you didn't mention him earlier, but you were going to, with this trumpet harmonics thing. He puts that at the end of his day now, and he looks forward to it. He said he's still he's absolutely pumped by the results he's had since September. You know, it's incredible.
Can we talk about the Hicks routines that you sent out? Did you all got the Bill Hicks routine?
I haven't had time to flick through them, but I'm looking forward to them.
Yeah, you guys can look at it and maybe comment on it.
I'm not really, I wasn't really into it because I downloaded today's morning. But I have to add something to all of those things that you mentioned about how to teach and stuff like that. The way I see it is like the way that actually Claude Gordon, I'm really more conservative maybe on the Claude Gordon stuff. And I guess I'm in the same page with you, Jeff, about this. The way that I see it is like, I see it more athletic, you know, because I came with the background of playing swimming and stuff like that. You know, I see it more physically, and those I mean, you know, system. I mean, Claude Gordon's approach is like he actually organized tool. Like when you go to the gym, you have some tools to improve yourself in the gym and build the muscles. And he actually mentioned in different ways, maybe. And the way I can say it is like that you are a coach, that you have to give them a program to use those tools to build those muscles. So in terms of motivation, it's hard for me to you know, to think about it. I see it that the student has to be actually motivated in order to I could give them something to play it, because personally I was like that, you know. I was already motivated at practice a whole lot, but I couldn't gain anything out of it. And the way that Jeff presented Claude Gordon's approach helped me to be more organized and work on everything and nothing be neglected in a way. So in terms of motivating students, it's kind of difficult for me to understand it, you know, because you know, the way I see it, like if you want to teach swimming to the students, they, you know, they have to be in the swimming class and practice all together. That's the way that they are getting better on the swimming or in the running or whatever is the athletic program they are going to improve. But you know, for students, they have like just one session in a week, and they practice with the coach or with the teacher, and they have to be motivated to, you know, to keep practicing. But you know, if the student was already motivated and want to improve, actually they're practicing, and it's a simple way. I mean, the way that Claude Gordon present those tools is the simplest way possible, I guess. And if you add something else to that, you make his approach actually mystical, and it is difficult to understand. It is not clear, and how much practice you have to do on different sort of things. He eliminates many things out of as far as I can say. He eliminates mystics, if I'm not mistaken in pronouncing that. He eliminates those things that is not clear to make it more simple to understand, and make it simple, as far as I can say, as the way I see it is like that.
I think
back to
it's,
you, Jeff.
yeah, I think his 7 elements really help.
Exactly.
They become like a, I don't know how else to say this, but a diagnostic mantra, because
Yeah.
if you pick on the 7, you'll usually find the answer or the root of the problem.
Exactly.
It's a brilliant list, and it's very simple.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where, like in my,
Before I forget, there's something that he was actually David was talking about. That's the way you do it. You have to hit the fingers. I mean, lift the fingers high and strike the valves hard. He was explaining to his student, as far as I can remember, and through processing, through teaching, actually, I realized other things that comes from that idea that you have to lift the fingers and strike the valves hard is because you if you don't do that, you won't improve the left hand. Actually, you have to be in command. Several times he said, several times he mentioned that the left hand is really important. And if you won't keep the left hand's hard, you won't be able to lift the fingers and strike the valve. And I mean, it's hard to explain, but you have to hit it hard, and when you hit it hard, it forces you to keep the left hand also really hard and be in command. That's why they ask us to do that, as far as I can say.
Yeah, and that's when you can always you can see whenever you watch a great trumpet player, like it doesn't even matter if they were a Claude Gordon student, they always do that. Like you look at Wooden play, his hand, you look at it, it's like just like like, and Alan Bazzuti as well, or Tudo Sandoval, all those guys. If you watch the way they hold the horn, there's no
one point that I tell my students: pay attention to the fingerings. There's a video from Arturo. I forgot the name of this piece. So if you saw the video at the ITG conference, he changes the E, the D, following the principles of Clark, like in the technical studies. And we must have the habit to use more the E right here, not here. At some point, doing the D sharp and E, like here, not here. So these kind of things we can learn as a shortcut, applying Claude Gordon or Clark 7 steps. For me, the 7 steps is go to the point. Exactly. If you choose one of the 7 steps, you go right to the point where the students have some difficulties, not doing some exercises without knowing why I'm doing this exercise for a kid, or for me too, when I'm playing, when I'm studying. When I took a piece, okay, I'm playing phrases here, okay, let me play. If I found some difficulties, let's follow what Jeff put in the book. Backward, 4 times each bar, each tempo, and I applied that. The results for my students is absolutely fantastic. And after that, I went to the website when there's a letter from Clark. I forgot the university. Where is the belongings of Clark?
oh, probably
Memphis.
Illinois. I think it's in Illinois.
Yeah, I think Illinois. And I found some letters. And one letter, there's a story of Clark when he played study for 1 trumpet in the band, and he thought that he was playing very good. After he finished, he asked his friend, what did you think of my playing? And he said, you played 17 wrong notes. this for Clark was absurd. How can I play 17 wrong notes? It's not possible. And after that, he promised for himself that after this event, I will never play in public unless 100%. And every time I practice, I will play 10 times. 10 times, how can I say?
Correctly.
Accurately.
Correctly,
Yeah.
correctly, without a mistake. And after that, I will show to the public. There is, this information is on letter. And I have
Yeah, that's
letter
actually
here.
that's in the autobiography thing that's up on my website called How I Became a Cornetist. And I think
Yeah.
David actually went through and did some of the
That
revisions
was my
on
my first editing job.
Yeah, he edited a lot of that. That's on my site. So it's on there.
Yeah.
It's free. Anyone can look at it. And it's all
No,
broken
I
into
like
chapters.
Clark. I like Clark because he says 4 times. And I had a student say, well, why have I got to do this 4 times? And I said, because
Yeah.
you can be lucky the 3rd time.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things you guys were talking
4
about,
times, 4 times you can own it. 3
What-
times lucky.
one of the things you guys made me think about is with the 7 items, in my ebook, I'd read a book about habits, and I forgot the author, but he used this
Exactly.
term keystone habits. And the idea was that if you focused on the most core habit, it would cause all the other things to kind of fall into place more. So like, for example, if a student comes in and they're worried about mouthpiece pressure or tightness and different things that we can obviously hear and they can notice in their playing, when instead of telling them, don't do this, don't do that, if you focus on like tongue level and wind power and the flexibility studies and coordinating those other secondary issues tend to resolve themselves, because the exercises, like we were saying earlier, when you stay on them long enough, they start to change your habits. And then the bad habits that, like we were talking about, tend to resolve themselves because the core habits have like caused that to happen.
And the principles are correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to send you guys a video. I don't know if you've seen John Harburg. He's from Washington State University, I think. He's done 2 videos on trumpet physics. It's about 6 minutes long. Really, really important thing to watch. He kind of suggests that the lip vibrations are a byproduct of the molecules traveling around, the excited molecules of the trumpet. I think it's fascinating because, guy in the New York Phil Smith, he had an embouchure collapse, and he's been working through this idea, and it's just this a little bit of science.
I've seen both of those videos.
Oh, cool. Okay.
And the one with Smith. I really dive deep whenever I'm doing my trumpet stuff. So, and but one of the things is that Phil Smith talks about is that he wished he never got into buzzing. So that's like, and it's like the most deepest, most heartfelt. You can tell that it's in the core of his soul.
Yeah.
That he says it with conviction. And this is coming from the guy who was the trumpet player, the Philharmonic, New York, like. So it's like, I think it's important to understand when we talk about lip buzzing that it's not a means to an end. Like you can actually do damage with it. So it's like, be very careful.
I think I damaged myself before I practiced with Jeff. And I'm sorry that interrupt your word, but as far as my memory helps, when I started with Jeff, because I didn't have practice room and stuff like that, I started, the first things that I asked from Jeff was, do you have any sort of buzzing exercise to give me, because I don't have practice room? And he said, I don't have any sort of exercise like that. You have to blow your horn. And that makes me actually, it was really logical for me because it was really different. Because all the articles that I follow on the internet at the time was about do the pencil exercise.
Yeah,
you know, and it hurt me a lot. Sorry that
Yeah.
interrupt your words. Go
There,
ahead.
and I'm gonna jump in for a second. Like, there's one thing, I don't know if you've seen it, but up on my YouTube, I posted Phil Smith did a master class at University of Southern California back in the 90s, and I had a little camcorder and I recorded it, and years later converted it and uploaded it on YouTube. And it was really cool. There was lots of musical things, and it was not really addressing like physical things of playing, but in some of it you can hear him singing excerpts and go like da 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 dee da 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 do da dee do, and he's like saying syllables. And so after the clinic was over, I wish I would have left my camera running. I said, hey, do you think of tongue level and vowels when you're doing this? Like, of course, but
Yeah.
he never talked about it in any of his lectures. And so many
Yeah.
people think, oh, just
They
think,
keep it secret,
ah,
as far as I can say. They keep it secret, as Claude mentions that. They keep
Yeah.
it secret. You know, the most important thing is tongue, and it is secret. They keep
Yeah.
it secret, as I can see.
I mentioned with Jeff at some classes, I don't remember when, but as I know a little bit Schluter and the Boston school, at some master classes here in Brazil, he said about the tone level, and that he's playing with tone level, that he arcs the tongue in the front and he articulates with this part here, not this part. So the first time I heard about the tongue level was with Schluter, and he mentioned K-tongue modified by Clark. But if you read something on ITG, anyone mentioned that. But I think the secret.
It is not the main focus, actually. It is not they're just passing from the tongue. And they focus on lips and somehow on breathing exercise and stuff like that.
Yeah,
they're not focusing on the tongue.
And that's what I'm talking about when I talk about like tricking a student into doing something. Like, you don't, because like the reality is if you focus on anything, you can actually learn to K-tongue modify incorrectly as well. So it's like you have to be careful with, like, because I remember for a while when I was learning K-tongue modified, I would force my tongue. You know, like I was like, you know what, this needs to be down here. Let me try it from here. And then it was like, I realized that's all right. That's counterproductive. It's like, there's a way to like talk to them, have them think about things so that you get them to flip stuff with their tongue. And once they're doing that, then it's like, relax, now just speak and let it and like.
Actually, I was focused on the sound. I make it really easy for myself. I make it simple for myself.
But
I definitely take every student through K-tongue modified on Clark's 3, you know, and learning that backwards forwards. Like, I think that's important no matter what, even if they do it not right or perfectly or like somewhat wrong or anything, like get them to do it until it's where everything starts to settle in and the habit starts to settle in. Because once that habit of the K-tongue modified starts to really settle in, there's no turning back. The body learns it and it wants to do it that way. And then if you ever see it kind of collapse from there, then you bring it back in another exercise so that it starts to, like, you know, or I try not to, like, once the tonguing thing starts happening properly, it's like, try not to focus on it too much, because then they start, it depends on the student, right? Some students are really analytical and they get really,
as far as my memory helps, Jeff told me that your K-tonguing actually should sound like a single tongue. And it was the simplest way to present me, and I focus to make my sound when I'm K-tonguing exactly like that, and that improved me a lot. And it was the simplest way, I guess, to explain it for me.
Well,
thank you, Jeff.
Some people will get it that way, though. Some people will be like, okay, yeah, you got to really you got to really like think about that really, really. And then some people are like, oh, you mean, and then they get it. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, you don't want to like one thing I noticed that Claude said is, if you ever come across a trumpet player who studied another school of the trumpet, but they're playing correctly, it means that it doesn't matter what they think, they know or what it is that they teach or what it is that they want to abide by. Sometimes the words and the concept don't matter. It's what's happening physically. And if the feel is correct and it's easy, then they're playing correctly. And then at that point, you don't really want to, if they come to you for a lesson, then they're ready to hear it. But if you don't want to intrude on somebody, you don't want to, if they're doing it correctly, because it's like counterproductive. And they're doing it right no matter what it is that they're saying. Because it's really hard to understand what's going on in their mouth. The tongue, if you look at a diagram of the tongue and all the muscles in the tongue, is crazy.
Well,
there's no muscle in the body that does that goes this way, that way, that way, that way, you know. So
I think the phrase that should explain what you are talking about is the phrase from Claude Gordon: get the sense of it.
yeah.
If you are studying
well, I remember the first time when I heard about K-tongue modified, I didn't really hear that name, but I was at a summer music camp. I think I was about in 8th grade. And I don't know if Mario, if you've ever run into this guy, my junior high school didn't have a jazz band. There was this guy named David Etterbeek. I think he was somewhere up in the San Francisco or the Sacramento area. And first time I ever sat in a jazz band, and they were playing swing and they played changes. And there was this kid that was younger than me that he was also really little for his age. And he was so awesome. And then we sat down in the wind ensemble and we had auditions, and he got first chair, and he was doing this Procession of the Nobles by Rimsky-Korsakov. And we all had to audition on this thing, and it had this little, and he was single tonguing it, and he just nailed every single note so precisely. And I was sitting there going, what do I do? How can I make this happen? And during the week or two that we were there, I was talking with him and this other college counselor. It said, oh, you got to tongue this other way with your tongue like this. And it's in the Clark's characteristic studies. Go get that book. And I don't know if the other guy was a Claude Gordon student or not, but the two of them were talking about it. I was hanging out with them and they explained it to me. So I went and got characteristic studies, read about it, and tried it. And I was like, I can't make this work. What's wrong with this? It must be me. It must not just be possible for me. I've maybe tried it 2 or 3 days. And then I put that book in my closet and never looked at it for about another year or two later. And when I went to the Claude Gordon camps, and I got set up to have my first lesson with Claude Gordon, he said, he'd already explained K-tongue modified. And he said, I said, what do I do before my lesson? And it was going to be a couple weeks. He said, I just want you to do this little tonguing exercise out of his tongue level studies, which all it was a chromatic scale, like a bunch of low C's, then a C sharp going. He said, I want you to just practice single tonguing this way. It was like anything else. He was like, no, just that. So when I came to my first lesson, I could already single tongue K-tongue modified. And he was like, okay, just that's your way to single tongue now. But no, it never would have happened if he wouldn't have just said, just do this every day until you can make it happen. And I wasn't, my speed on the single tonguing took a while to improve, but it's like that became like the new way to single tongued. And it wasn't until I had enough time on it for it to really work. Now I know Mario was going to say something, but one thing I was going to mention before I forget about it is in like Bill Hicks, he took lessons with Claude Gordon for 17 years. So he let me copy all of his routines and I scanned them and everything. The purpose of me showing that with you, is to see like, not just like it being like these things to like hand out to students, but to see kind of the process. There's a couple things in it, like you'll see the order of the Daily Trumpet Routines book was handwritten. This is before it was published. So you'll see how Claude originally did it. And then if you compare that to the current Daily Trumpet Routines, you'll see how he reorganized it a little bit to make it more systematic. And then also later in Bill's lessons, he goes through some of the French books by Alphonse Leduc. So that's kind of neat. And then he also goes through Schlossberg, which I never went through Schlossberg with Claude, but to see the order and how Claude took someone through Schlossberg, combining it with other things. I think you'll find it kind of interesting. And I'm sure we're going to do this again. We'll be able to like discuss what we think about looking at that stuff. And I know Mario's got to leave soon, so I'll let him just talk.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's great. It's it's amazing to hear all these different perspectives and all of us saying the same things and coming from different cultural backgrounds and experience backgrounds and everything. It's awesome because it's like the reality is the principles and the physicality of it is it's never going to change. It's metal.
Yeah.
It's metal, teeth, lips, air, face, psychology, you know, psychology, and you can only approach those things a numerous amounts of ways. And but yes, it was a pleasure to talk with everybody, to meet you guys, you know,
Yeah.
hearing about you throughout the years. I have your book, David, and I use it, and it's great. And
Before you go, Mario,
from
before
back
you,
in the ancient internet days where I would see you a video of you doing the Clarks. Now you're here. He's a real person. And then another Silva.
Another
I know,
Silva.
isn't that funny?
yeah,